Hi, here we go. Okay, so hopefully you've got your kit or you've ordered it. You'll really need it starting the first week when we start doing these projects. Um, First off, you will get a couple things that I will have forgotten that you'll be getting to that we'll be using throughout. But here are the main parts. You will get this special tape, frog tape, if you haven't used that before. It's got an acrylic polymer in the edges of the tape, so when it gets wet, it seals the edges and can make a nice, perfect line. It comes in this cute little container, so keep it in the container because the whole thing is you don't want this to get all fuzzy and dirty. It'll screw around with the integrity of the lines you're trying to make. So keep it in its container and it'll stay safe. It's expensive tape, so you want to keep it and use it just for the class or just for artwork. Don't use it for wrapping presents or whatever, taping things together, whatever. You'll also get an X-Acto knife, and I know a lot of you have X-Acto knives from design class, but that doesn't matter because any good artist has like 8 X-Acto knives and they're all over the place in your studio, wherever. The thing I always tell everyone to do when you get your knife and the blade's out like this, sometimes it comes with a plastic protective cover over the blade. Those are really crap. They don't stay on well. So what I always do, and what I've trained myself to do when I train my students, and even my friends and I race radio control cars, so we use a lot of these same tools, and I always tell them, take the blade out and turn it inside out, or upside down, and put it back into the hasp, and screw it on so the blade's like this. That will keep you safer. Don't carry around an X-Acto knife in your pocket or anything, but this will really help. So X-Acto knife, you've got that. A palette knife, that's for mixing paint, right? I think you've got 2 brushes. These are called angled shaders, and you can see they've got an angle at the top. So these are really great. They're really versatile because you can use them for painting broad areas in a wash, or you can use them to paint really fine, sharp lines. And they've also got a point, so if you need to do really detailed areas, you can do it with that as well. I think you've got a bigger one like this and a small one. So these are really great brushes. They're synthetic. That means they're not made out of hog hair or some exotic weasel hair, which the really expensive brushes are made out of that. But they're really good. You'll get a paper palette that's like this, and it's like a refined version of wax paper. So you can mix paint on this, and the paper won't get all soggy or anything. And so this is your palette right here. I've got a really giant one. You guys have a little bit smaller paper palette. You'll also get a T-square, and a lot of you have these from Art 110, and some of you don't. So sorry if you've got 2, but it's another thing that every artist will have a bunch of rulers and T-squares, and they're cheap anyhow. So this we'll use for layout a lot when you're laying out the design of your projects. To the paint. So I want you to get all of your tubes of paint out and lay them out. Oh, I don't have the magenta. So you've got a big tube of white and black, and you've got 2 reds, and you've got 2 yellows, and you've got 2 blues, and violet, and viridian, And then you've also got magenta, primary cyan, and primary yellow. So we're going to talk about these a little bit. Basically, this is organized around the Impressionist palette. And the Impressionists were all about capturing light and the impression of light upon surfaces. And that means that they wanted really highly saturated, really pure colors. So they based everything around the color wheel and on the primaries. So the primaries for subtractive color, like paint, are red, yellow, and blue. And within each of those, there are different temperatures of color. And we'll discuss that when we talk about the color wheel next week. But for now, let's look at what we've got. Here's the two blues that I've got. We've got ultramarine and sky blue, and then we've also got that third blue, which is the primary cyan. And I want you to take the primary cyan and I want you to set it over to the side. I just want to talk about these right now. The ultramarine blue is our cooler blue, and it is actually a replacement for historical blue called lapis lazuli. And lapis lazuli was at one point more valuable, more expensive than gold. It is a very important pigment and very beautiful pigment, but you know, a tube of gold this size would be many thousands of dollars, so we won't be using lapis. And then sky blue, which is a replacement for cerulean blue. And cerulean blue is a really heavy blue. It's a greenish blue, but it's also poisonous, just like every other paint, I think. And so this is a replacement for the poisonous version. All the fun art stuff is hazardous in some way. So I'll put those aside. I'm going to look at the two reds that we've got and the magenta that we've got. So you should have scarlet red, and you've got crimson red, and then primary magenta. I want you to take primary magenta and put that over to the side. So scarlet red is a replacement for cadmium red. And cadmium red is a heavy metal, also expensive and poisonous. But cadmium red was a development of the Industrial Revolution, when all of these new chemicals and processes were being discovered and figured out. They figured out with cadmium, the longer you cook it and the higher heat that you cook it, the redder and redder it becomes. So we'll see with our yellows are actually all based on cadmiums as well. So you have cadmium yellow, and you cook it longer and longer, and you get orange, and then red, and then all the way up into violet. There's even cadmium green. So that's our scarlet red. So this is a replacement that isn't toxic, but you know, still don't eat it. And then crimson red. This is our alizarin crimson. This is actually a replacement for an old pigment that is lac madder, and that is a pigment based on the root of a plant. And the reason that we have this replacement is that plant-based paints are fugitive. That means that they don't retain their color for very long. They're not permanent. And so everything we're using has high permanence. That means it's going to stay the same color for years and years and years. Whereas if we were using a lac madder, it wouldn't stay the same red for very long, maybe not even a year before it would start to fade. So those are our two reds. Put those over. And we've got, it's actually 4 total tubes of yellows. So we've got primary yellow here. I want you to take that, and I want you to set it over with that magenta and cyan. And I just want to look at these. So we've got 2 tubes of lemon yellow, and we've got 1 tube of deep yellow. So as I mentioned, these are both replacements for cadmiums, but they're less expensive and less toxic. Um, the lemon yellow, if you open that up, it's very cool, very lemony. And then the deeper yellow, in contrast, almost looks orangey compared to that first yellow. So the reason that we've got two lemon yellows is that these lighter colors like lemon yellow, they're they're weak in mixtures. So we'll use up a lot more of the lemon yellow trying to make it move mixtures towards one color or another. So that's why we've got a lot of the lemon yellow. It's very weak. So then you've also, so these yellows and reds and blues, these six colors basically, these are the original Impressionist palette. And they would make all the other colors from these primaries, and you certainly can. But the issue is that paint is imperfect. When we look at a spectrograph or a spectral analysis of the color of these paints, it's not like that when we look at the cadmium red, the scarlet, that we're looking at a flat line and then a peak right at the red and then back down to a flat line and nothing else. In reality, these colors are most strongly bouncing back red, but they also have all sorts of other wavelengths burbling under the surface. So what happens then, if I mix this red with this sky blue, we get kind of a little bit of a muddy violet. So we use some cheater colors, and that's this violet here. This is our cheater violet. If we mix the red and the blue together, we would get kind of a browned violet, kind of a little brownishness, whereas this violet is the pure pigment, so we would get a pure violet. And the same with the greens. It doesn't seem to happen with the oranges that we get from red and yellow, but when we're trying to make green, we can get a really nice kind of grass green. But when we try to get a little bit more emerald kind of green, that can get kind of muddy. So that's why we've got this viridian. So these are our two cheater colors. And of course we've got black and white. So this black is basically rusted copper. That's where the pigment comes from. And so it's a very dense, very black. Most blacks, and historically blacks, were made from carbon. And so it would be carbon from the black scraped off of burnt bones, or maybe the soot from gas lamps. So those are all carbon blacks. There's also Mars black, which is the rust of iron. And in this case we've got the rust of copper. So that's our black. And we've got titanium white. Titanium white is the most common white pigment in use on Earth. So probably everything around you, your walls, just anything that has been colored with white has titanium white in it. And it's basically the rust of titanium metal. It's not toxic, it's even in some food coloring. So titanium white is everywhere. It's a replacement for lead white, which you probably know is not non-toxic. Lead white is also more, it's a beigeier white, where this is a very pure, clean white. Those three tubes that I had you set over here, the primary magenta, the primary yellow, and the primary cyan, these are a different kind of primaries. These are printmaking primaries or process colors. So these are a little bit different color system, and it's a color system that relies on transparency to make color. So like package printing, like boxes, I'll use this type of, I wonder if there's indications on it.